Greetings, viewers, and welcome to our Sage 200 Multiple Bin Locations webinar. Today's presentation will include the following: an introduction to multiple bin locations, the defaults and setup required, standard bins, bin locations with levels, the processing of transactions with multiple bin locations, bin transfers, inventory count, and an SQL table change regarding multiple bin locations. Now, it's important to understand that there really are two platforms with regards to multiple bin locations. We have a standard bins, and then we have bin locations with multiple levels. And we'll be covering both those options in today's presentation. Now, if you think of a very practical example of bin locations, think of a supermarket where you've got multiple aisles, and within those aisles you've got shelves, and then with each shelf there's certain slots. So think of that scenario in the process or situation of multiple bin locations. Right, let's get started. Now, as with all modules within Sage 200 Evolution, it's important that we need to go and set up a few defaults before we begin processing. And first of all, we need to go to Inventory, Maintenance, and Warehouse Defaults. There's a tab for bin locations, and if we go in there, you'll see that there's two options: use multiple bin locations and use bin location levels. Now, very importantly is that if you are going to be implementing multiple bin locations within your database, you cannot go and deselect the option once you've processed transactions or once your bin locations have been created. So just be aware of that you can't go and deselect multiple bin locations after implementation. Right, so I'm going to specify to use multiple bin locations. And then we also have the ability to make use of bin transfers. So under my bin transfers tab, it's a case of specifying automatic numbering and a sequencing for your bin transfers. Same applies for your bin transfer reference numbering. And also importantly, to go set up a transaction code if you are going to be transferring bins, transferring items from one bin to the another. The default transaction code there is your adjustments. However, you certainly can go and set up your own transaction code with your relevant GL accounts. Now, just regards to bin transfers is that, remember, it's possible that you could have a centralized bin where when purchases are made, you then have all those items coming into a default bin, and perhaps once they've been checked or verified, you can then transfer them to subsequent bins where those items can then be sold, etc. So just be aware that that's really the way which you can transfer items from one bin to the other. Right, so we've implemented our multiple bin locations and we can now continue. Next, I'm going to go create a warehouse. So warehouses, and add a new one. And what you'll notice is that we've got two tabs there: bin location setup and bin locations. Right, so firstly, also note is that you can allow a warehouse to have multiple bin locations by simply selecting that option, which will then obviously means multiple bin locations in one warehouse. Right, so it's onto our bin locations tab, and I'm now going to go create my various bin locations within this particular warehouse. Right, so save the record first of all, and I'm going to add all existing items to my new warehouse. Right, so I'm going to give it a code, and we're going to use a particular lane. So we've got different lanes within our warehouse. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and link that warehouse to my bin locations. I'm going to say allow sales from that bin, allow purchases, and any new items I'm going to add to this particular bin. And if need be, I can also add existing items, and also very importantly, make the bin active. So it's a case of allow sales, allow purchases, add new items and existing items, and also make the bin active. Right, so remember is that I can also, for example, remove warehouses from a bin location if necessary. So I'm going to say okay to that. And I'm just going to create a few more bin locations. So we've got multiple bins within this warehouse. Right, so there we go. And allow those three options for the time being. Right, so just as I've added a warehouse or link to warehouse to bin location, I can certainly go remove a bin location or warehouse if it's no longer applicable at some point in time. Just want to make sure on that other one that I have implemented those options. Right, just go there. Right, so I think we're good to go. So I've got my bin locations, and if I now go to my bin location setup, you'll see that I can now specify a default sales bin and a default purchase bin. So as I mentioned, you can have one centralized bin where all purchases go into this bin. They can then be at some point received and then transferred to additional bins by using the bin transfer option. And then you could have, for example, a default sales bin and link it there if required. Right, that's all in order. And now we need to go and create a item. So if I go to my inventory items, and I'm going to go add a new one, make it a warehouse item first of all, and we can say, for example, right, so I'm now going to go to my warehouse tab and select the warehouse, which has now got the multiple bins linked to it. And I've now got a multiple bins tab. So if I open up that, you'll see that I've now got my bin locations, which have been linked to the warehouse. And very importantly is I can specify a minimum or maximum level per bin location. So very useful, for example, with regards to reordering processes, I can set those minimum and maximum levels per bin location. And at this point, I can also go specify default sales bin, default purchase bin for this particular warehouse. And I can also, for example, if I haven't got additional bins, I can certainly go load all the bins that have been selected or linked to that warehouse. So I've got all 4 bins there. And very importantly, I'm able to remove certain bins. So it's a case of simply saying, select the bin and then say remove all or remove selected. So remove selected, and I've now removed that particular bin from the warehouse. Load warehouse bins again, and we've got them back. So as you can see, I certainly can modify or change the structure of the bin locations on this particular warehouse. Right, so we've now linked the bin locations. We haven't specified a default sales bin or purchases bin. Say okay there, and we're good to go. So now I could simply go to additional warehouse and then link those bin locations there if required. Right, so I'm just going to go create an additional item here. mark it as a warehouse item, and I'm going to now do the same process by linking those bins. Right, so multiple bins, and I've got it. I'm going to load all the warehouse bins, and I'm good to go. Right, so okay there. Got my two items. They're marked as warehouse items. We've linked them to the bins. If necessary, we can obviously specify those minimum, maximum levels. And now it's a case of going to process a goods received voucher to bring in stock to those various bins. So transactions, goods received voucher, and let's just go create a supplier. Right, so we've got our details there, and we're now going to go and bring in some stock of those items. So very importantly, I've just specified my item and the warehouse. Right, there we go. And now I can simply go specify a location or a bin location. There we go. Right, the quantity. And next item, warehouse. Right, so this is a case whereby I've simply gone to go and bring in items to one bin location per line item. So I brought in that number of units to that bin location, and there's my pricing. Same thing applies to line number 2. So I'm now going to go and process the invoice, receive the stock as per normal. And I'm going to go print the GRV. So what you notice is that when printing the GRV is that it's going to give me a breakdown of the line item together with the bin location where the items were brought into, the warehouse and the quantity, and it's going to give me a breakdown there. So as you can see, the default layout within our common database has already got those options specified. So any sort of bin locations, you are going to have a breakdown of allocations per bin, per line item. On the supplier invoice, we've got a normal supplier invoice, and there's no need to display that information on our supplier invoice, but obviously the GRV, very important. Right, so now we have a different scenario where you may want to allocate or bring in items to multiple bin locations from one line item. Let's see exactly how that works. So on my drop down, once again, pick up my supplier. Right, now very importantly, I'm going to specify a warehouse, okay, and not specify a bin location. In this instance, go directly to the quantity field, and what you notice is you now have an icon there which allows us to allocate multiple receipts to multiple bin items. So click on the icon, and what I've got there is I can now specify the bin locations and the quantity coming into a specific bin. Right, so on my bin locations, there we go, specify my bin. Tells me what the available quantity currently is in that bin. And now I can add some additional quantities. Right, there we go. And I can say, so now it's given me the total quantity coming in, multiple bin locations, and I can then say, okay, that. Just be aware that you can obviously, in this instance, load bins with quantity available only. You can obviously load the item bins, and there's also the default quantity being quantity on hand or 0 quantity. So once again, multiple bins specify my quantity, and I'm good to go. So I've got my details there, and I'm now going to continue. So second item, specify the warehouse, and once again, no bin location specified, directly to the quantity field, and I can simply go and specify the quantity coming in. Right, so I've got my full quantity there. Okay, and I can obviously carry on and then receive items into multiple bins from one line item. Right, so I'm going to now go and process and receive the stock. And if you look at our goods received voucher, you'll see that I've now got item code with the details. I've got a breakdown for those multiple bins, warehouse and quantity, which obviously correspond to my line quantity. And I've got a full breakdown there. So very useful. It is there as a standard layout, and I can see exactly the quantities that have come in to the various bins within my warehouse. So the important thing to remember here is that in that instance, it's a case of do not specify the bin location, simply the warehouse, and then move directly into the quantity field and then allocate them to the multiple bins from that point. If there's not going to be multiple bin allocations, simply a case of normal entering of information, specify the warehouse, bin locations, and the quantity. Right, so let's just go check out our inquiries now, and we can see exactly how the transaction has come through under inquiries. So I'm going to go to my transaction history, and view there. And what you notice is that obviously we've got the details there. And very importantly, I am able to, on the grid columns, customize the grid, add the bin location name, so I can see exactly which transaction came in and also to which bin those goods came into. And what you'll notice is that we've got the GRV number together with every line item. So in this particular instance, it's going to give you a record of every line item linked to a bin. So in this particular instance, they're all linked to GRV number 2. However, we've got 3 line items all in the one transaction, however, broken down by our various bin locations. So very useful for keeping track of bin locations. Right, so once we receive the goods, we can then go and do an invoice. So normal invoice. And we can then just go process transactions. Once again, specify the warehouse. And now at this particular point, I can simply go and specify my different bins. And there we go. So in this particular instance, I'm going to be invoicing from one line item. However, I'm going to specify invoice from different bin locations. So there we go. Specified my bin locations, the quantity available, quantity to be invoiced, got my grand total there, and I can say okay. Right, so I'm going to invoice 10 units. Right, and I've broken them down by different bin locations. Process the transaction. And we've generated a normal invoice. Right, and then just once again, going back to another transaction, once again, the same option applies, is that if you are invoicing from only one particular bin, specify the bin location there. and then it's one bin location, one line. So once again, remember is that at this point, I am able to also go invoice out of multiple bin locations from the one line item by simply bypassing bin location, going to quantity, and then specifying which bin locations are applicable to that transaction line. Right, so as I mentioned previously, is that you may have instances where items are received in one centralized bin, and once it maybe been, for example, inspected or reviewed, they can then be transferred to other bins for sales purposes, etc. And the way to process that type of scenario is by processing bin transfer. We have implemented the bin transfer settings under our defaults. So bin transfers, batch format, specify the details there. We've got our transaction code, description, etc. And we're good to go. Right, so specify the item code, the warehouse where it currently stands, the quantity available, and from which bin location. So currently we're saying in that bin location, that quantity is available. We're now going to be transferring to a separate bin location, quantity, and the cost of that item. Right, so next line item. Right, we're good to go. So validate, everything's in order, and I can then go post the batch. So just remember, in this particular instance, we are transferring items which are specific to the bin location from one bin location to the other. Right, so good to go, and I can post the batch. And if we then just preview the batch or the bin transfer, it's going to give me my details, the warehouse, references, etc., from which bin to which bin, and then the quantity that has been transferred. Obviously, also able to customize the layout and add additional fields if required. Right, so post the batch, and let's just go back to our inquiries, and we can see exactly what has happened. So there I've got my adjustment, and it just tells me that we then have the quantity going out, quantity coming in, and obviously with details of that bin location. So a full tracking of transactions that have occurred between the bin locations. Right, then we also have the ability to make use of the stock count and implement the bin locations there. Under transactions, I'm going to go to inventory count. I'm going to add a count. So it's a normal process for inventory count. And then just under my warehouses, I'm just going to include only the one warehouse. And then very importantly, I am able to include bin locations within my inventory count. So tick the box, and then I can do a from and to selection per bin. So I am able then to specify only go and do a stock count in a specific warehouse for an item and restrict it to certain bin locations. Right, I'm going to say all bin locations in that warehouse. Okay. And if I then go to my edit, let's just go firstly to our inventory count report. And we'll just see if I go to warehouses tab there. Once again, I can say include bin locations, and then I can print my stock count sheet to display bin locations, obviously make that counting process so much easier. So just preview that and see exactly what it looks like. Right, so what I've done there is I've got my item code, and I can simply go add the bin location as a customization, the layout, and then I've got my 3 items there, broken down by bin locations. Same thing applies to the second item, those 4 bin locations, the system quantity, and then it's a case of simply going to go and count those items per bin locations. So really quite easy to implement, that you can then go and differentiate between bin locations on our inventory count. Right, so I'm then just simply going to go through to our edit quantities field. And once again, if you use that option, I've got my bin locations and I can simply insert the count quantity there if required. Now, very importantly is that if you are going to be importing a count under the import option, it's once again saying, well, specify the file that you're intending to import on your account. And then very importantly is that if I move down, I can include the fields and I can certainly include the bin location on my import file. So I could, for example, have the item code, the count quantity, include the warehouse code as well as bin location, and then import those details into my account as would a normal count, but obviously also have the ability to use the bin location field if you are going to be counting via bin location, want those details to be available. So one of the things is that if you are going to be adding a count and under warehouses, you simply say include the warehouse, don't specify to include the bin locations. You're going to have a count which looks similar to this. And if I go to my inventory count report, you'll see that if I preview it, that it's just going to give me details of the item. So once again, it's a case of just the item, and that's the global quantity, which includes the quantity in all bin locations. So just depending on how you want to structure your count, you can obviously include or exclude those bin locations. Right. So that's the process or the different processing methods with regards to standard bin locations. Now, we can then move on to our second option, which is implementing bin locations with levels. So I'm just going to close these screens and move into a different database whereby we need to set up a couple of options with regards to those bin location levels. So once again, back to our inventory, maintenance, warehouse defaults, and bin locations. And I'm going to say use multiple bin locations. And in this particular instance, in this database, I'm going to say use bin location levels. Now, firstly, we need to go and specify separator. So as you can see, there's a couple of characters that we can make use of, which are valid, and we can implement them as separators. So I'm going to use my symbol being the separator. And just once again, just picture the scenario of a supermarket where we're going to set up 3 levels. So as you can see, we are able to set up to 10 levels with regards to bin location levels. And first level is going to be the top level being the aisle. So I've got an aisle within my supermarket or my warehouse. It's going to be the top level. And then I can specify a length for that level. So this just means number of characters that are going to be applicable to this level. And you obviously could have different level lengths per level. Now, within the aisles, we've got shelves. So I'm going to say, for example, a shelf, and also specify a level length. And then our final third level is going to be a slot. So the aisle, we have shelves, and within those shelves are different slots. And that's where the items are going to be stored. So I'm going to, for example, call that level a slot and also specify a length for that level. Right, so as you can see, you can be up to 10 levels there, and obviously just structure those levels as per your stock handling or your stock requirements within your stores or whatever, or wherever the stock is being displayed or being stored. Right, so multiple bin locations implemented, multiple bin levels implemented, specified my separator and my different levels, and I'm good to go. Once again, bin transfers, we can implement those as required. Right, so good to go. And just a couple of warnings about adding existing items, etc. And we can continue. Now, very importantly is that when using levels, we really need to go set up our bin levels or the potential options that are available, combinations, in order for us to now go create our different levels. So under inventory, we've got an option for maintenance, and we've got something called bin location level values. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually specifying all the possible values that I can have within my organization for those multiple bin locations. So let's just think of a couple of scenarios. So for example, when it comes to aisles, I can have 1, 2, 3, and we've got 4 aisles. So when it comes to shelves, I can, for example, have top, center, as well as lower. And then when I come to those slots within the shelves, I can have different slots. So for example, right, so what I'm inserting here is all the possible values that I could have for my particular levels on my multiple bin locations. So you may have a scenario where you've got a huge amount of levels or values that we need to insert. So we do the ability to import values. So it's a case of going to my import values and then simply going to go specify the file that I'm going to be making use of. Now, just for you to see the file format is if I open up a file, it's going to be a text or a text file. And it's simply a case of listing all the values, one under in a specific order, one under the other. And I can simply import those values and not need to then go capture them manually within the application. So back to Sage 200 and import the values. Once again, text file, specify the text file to be imported. And there we go. So I've now imported those values. So a quick and easy way, if you've got multiple values that you want to import, and certainly as you add those values or those levels or values, you can certainly use the import facility and not have to capture them manually if there are a large number of values to be imported. Right, so I'm going to say save to that. And we're good to go. Just one thing very important is that, remember, is that we've set up those lengths when we set up our different levels. So very importantly, the system is going to validate and ensure that the number of characters in your values do not exceed the length of the level that you specified. Right, so import those details. All our values are available, and we can say close. Right, so next we're going to go to our bin location level setup. And all I'm doing now is I'm linking those values to my various levels. So we've got our 3 levels there. And under our aisle, if I go to my values, I'm simply going to specify which values are applicable to my aisles. So once again, let's just go, for example, to aisle 1. Move down, aisle 2, aisle 3, and we've then got 4. So I've now linked those values to my level of aisle. Next is going to be the shelf. So we know that it's going to be top shelf, center, and then lower shelf. Right, so there we go. In the slot is we're going to go specify the 4 slots we've set up, being those 4 options. Right. Okay, and there we go. So aisles have got 4 values, shelves have got our 3 values, and the slots are 4 values there. Right, save and close. And if necessary, when I'm adding additional values, I can only just come in here and link those values to the different options. Right, save and close, and I'm good to go. Right, so now it's a case of going to go create our warehouses. And let's just go through to creating our warehouse. Right, so I've got my bin location level set up. And now I've got my level length and my levels. Okay, and I'm now going to go create my bin locations. Save the record. Now what we have here is a wizard which is going to assist us to create all the possible bin locations based on our levels and our values. So firstly, we're specifying a warehouse, which we've done, and we're saying allow purchases and sales within the warehouse. Always add bins to new inventory warehouse items, and add these bins to existing inventory items if applicable. Right, so I've got my 3 levels there, and just look at the filters. So once again, I've specified the potential values for aisle, shelf, and slot. And it's very possible that within a specific warehouse, certain values may not be applicable. So at this point, I can obviously come and deselect them or deselect those options which aren't applicable to my warehouse. Right, so I'm specifying create all the potential or possible combinations of levels and bins. Right, so I can continue now. Next, and the system has now gone to go create all the possible combinations of values and levels for my bins within that warehouse. So for example, as you can see, I've got top shelf, aisle number 1, top shelf, slot AAA, aisle 1, top shelf, slot BBB, etc. And then if we move down, we've got aisle number 2 with all those combinations, aisle number 3, aisle number 4, and we obviously specified those particular as our separator, which we set up under our defaults. And then obviously we can go and at this point also go and edit these options before completing it. So at this point you can obviously go and remove certain bin locations and change a couple of the settings applicable before adding those bins. Now very importantly is that you may from time to time add additional bins. So you can simply use this wizard to create the new bins automatically. And obviously it's going to check which bins exist, not create those, and obviously create only the new bins which may be applicable to the new levels and values that you have set up. Right, so I'm happy with that scenario. All the potential combinations are available. And just say next. Right, it tells me that these particular bins have been added successfully. And simply case of finish. Right, now if I go to my bin locations, I've got them set up there, no problem. And at this point, I can simply go specify a default sales bin, default purchase bin, etc. Right. And now it's a case of going to my warehouse, creating that inventory item. Okay, and Right, so at this point, I've created my item, marked it as a warehouse item. And let's just go to our warehouses and edit that. Save the record. And if I go to my multiple bins, you'll see that once again, all the bins have been created there. And I can simply go and remove certain bins if necessary, add additional bins if required. And I can then once again go and load those bins if I need to. Right, so once again, very similar. However, in this particular instance, we've got multiple levels of bins. Now, let's just go save that option, and we can then go through to our invoicing or our goods received vouchers and process it to multiple levels. So we've then got our supplier, our warehouse, and then we then go and allocate to multiple bins. So let's just go and let's just go and modify the item slightly. It seems like I didn't save those bin locations. So let's just go back to inventory items, edit, and we'll go to, there we go, edit the item, multiple bins, and just load those warehouse bins and say okay there. Right, they have been saved, and we can say okay to that. Back into inventory transactions, goods received voucher, and specify the details. And we can then once again specify the different bins and the quantities coming in. Right, so we're good to go. Process the invoice. And once again, you've got the breakdown, bin location, warehouse, and the quantity, and which then corresponds to our item or line quantity. Right. Now, just something to remember is that based on the implementation of multiple bin locations, there has been a change with regards to the SQL table. So previously, if on versions 720 and earlier, you would have a separate option for bin locations. Now, remember is that you would have, for example, a stock item, and you would have a stock item being able to be linked to one bin location only. So on previous versions, version 720 and before that, under inventory, you'd have bin locations. You then obviously just come and add a bin location, link that to an inventory item. Now, if you are upgrading your database from version 720 to version 920 or version 10, the bin locations are now would now have changed, and you can find them under item categories. So if you had bin locations on those versions after upgrading, they are now known as item categories, and those details will be found under this particular option. And if you go to, for example, inventory items, edit the item, and under the information tab, you've got that item category, and that information will then appear there. So just remember is that bin locations upon upgrading then form part of item categories, and they will be available in this particular field within your stock items. Now, very importantly is that the table changed. So for example, on version 720 and before, those details were stored in a file called _BTBL bin location. Okay? And however, now upon upgrading, they have now been moved to an SQL table known as _ETBL stock categories. So that's been the SQL table change with regards to the implementation of multiple bin locations within SageStream Devolution. So as you can see, two useful platforms for setting up bin location: standard bin locations, which then allows you to implement one item having multiple bin locations, and then also in processing transactions, invoices, GRVs, able to receive stock from one line item, allocate that to multiple bins. And then further to that is the relevant implementation changes with regards to how processing takes place with regards to bin transfers, stock counts, etc. And then also, if required within your stock holding, you are able to implement bin locations with levels, obviously setting up those levels, separators, etc., and then setting up those values, linking them to different levels, and then creating those combinations of bin locations. So as you can see, multiple bin locations are a very useful and efficient way of maintaining or handling your stock holding. I do hope this presentation has been useful. Thank you for tuning in. It's over and out for me, and goodbye.